The courtroom was packed. You could feel the tension in the air, thicker than smoke in a burning house. A young black lawyer, fresh out of Harvard Law, adjusted his tie as he stepped up to the bench. Across from him sat an older white judge, face carved with smug disdain, who barely looked up before sneering. "You think you're gonna school me, son?" the judge said, tapping his gavel with an air of superiority. "Don't overplay your hand." The courtroom chuckled, not kindly, but cruelly. Yet, the young lawyer didn't flinch. He looked the judge dead in the eye. "I'm not here to play," he said slowly. "I'm here to expose the truth." Flashback. 2 weeks earlier, Michael Holloway was the name. 29 years old, brilliant mind, quiet demeanor. Raised in Atlanta by a single mother who worked double shifts at Grady Hospital, Michael knew from a young age what injustice looked like. When his cousin Jerome was wrongfully imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit, Michael swore he'd change the system that allowed it to happen. That promise carried him through high school, through sleepless nights at Harvard, and straight into a law firm that barely hired black attorneys, but hired him because they couldn't deny his genius. And then came the Vickers case. Marla Vickers, a wealthy businesswoman, was accused of embezzling nearly $5 million from a nonprofit meant to fund inner-city schools. The evidence was overwhelming, except for one problem. Her lawyers claimed she was framed. They spun a tale that the real criminal was a janitor, an older black man named Luther Grant, who had worked for the nonprofit for 15 years and had no prior offenses. Michael took one look at the case and knew something stunk. The judge assigned? Judge Raymond Callister, known behind closed doors for his bias and open contempt toward young lawyers of color. He was the last person Michael wanted presiding over a case like this. But the firm needed someone to defend Luther Grant, and Michael volunteered without blinking. In the weeks that followed, Michael combed through financial records, email threads, and phone logs. What he found shocked even him. There were digital fingerprints all over the embezzlement trail, but none of them pointed to Luther. Instead, they traced back to Marla Vickers' private accountant. The catch? The accountant had mysteriously died in a car accident just 2 months ago. Back in Courtroom, the trial had begun, and true to reputation, Judge Callister interrupted Michael every chance he got. "Objection sustained," he barked, even when the prosecution didn't raise an objection. "Stick to facts, counselor. Not your feelings." The spectators noticed it. The gallery murmured every time the judge cut Michael off. Even Marla's expression shifted, like she wasn't sure whose side the judge was actually on. Then came the twist. Michael requested to bring in a forensic accountant as an expert witness. Judge Callister leaned forward with a grin that didn't touch his eyes. "You want to waste this court's time with math?" Denied. Michael didn't react outwardly, but something inside him snapped. After a brief recess, he returned with a legal motion. Calm, confident. And this time, when he stood before the judge, he didn't flinch. "Your Honor," Michael began, his voice measured. "I would like to remind the court that a refusal to allow critical expert testimony, especially when that testimony could exonerate a defendant, is a violation of due process." Judge Callister raised an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting I don't understand due process?" "No, Your Honor," Michael said, pausing dramatically. "I'm suggesting that if you block this witness, your bias could cost you your seat." The courtroom froze. A pin could have dropped and echoed. Marla Vickers' eyes widened. Her lawyer looked around like he wanted to disappear. And Judge Callister? His face flushed a deep, embarrassed red. "Young man," he hissed, "I'll hold you in contempt, that's your right." Michael interrupted. "Just as it's my right to file a judicial misconduct complaint with the State Bar Association. And I already have the paperwork ready to go." Gasps filled the courtroom. Judge Callister slammed his gavel. "Order! Order in this court!" Michael stepped back, hands behind his back, but his gaze never left the judge. He had just done the unthinkable, challenged a sitting judge in open court. And he did it with nothing more than facts, and a single, devastating sentence. Cut to, later that evening, Michael sat in a quiet corner of his apartment, staring at the digital copy of Luther's employment record. His phone buzzed. It was an anonymous number. He answered. A raspy voice on the other end said, "You've made yourself a target. You better watch your back, counselor. Some people don't like their secrets coming to light." Michael's breath caught. The line went dead, cut to black. The courtroom buzzed with quiet tension. Judge Whitaker leaned back in his chair, barely concealing his smirk. Across from him stood attorney Marcus Reed, calm, composed, and unreadable. The young black lawyer had just dismantled the prosecution's opening statement with surgical precision. But he wasn't finished. Marcus turned slowly toward the gallery. "Before this court continues to make a mockery of justice," he said, his voice sharp and clear, "I request that the court clerk enter into Record Exhibit B, the transcript of Judge Whitaker's sealed disciplinary hearing, dated April 17, 2016. Gasps erupted. Even the bailiff raised an eyebrow. Whitaker's face flushed red. "Mr. Reed, you are treading on dangerous ground." "With all due respect, Your Honor," Marcus replied, "you forfeited moral authority the day you used this bench to intimidate innocent defendants. Now the truth comes out." Whitaker's gavel hit the block once, twice, then a third time. "Bailiff, remove Mr. Reed from this courtroom." But no one moved. The bailiff hesitated, eyes flicking to the stunned jury and back to the judge. "I said remove him." Marcus calmly pulled a folder from his briefcase and held it up. "This file contains proof that you, Judge Whitaker, knowingly suppressed evidence in the Harris case. Evidence that would have exonerated a 17-year-old black teen who's now serving 20 years. The silence was suffocating. Even Whitaker didn't speak. "You said no one could outsmart you," Marcus said, stepping forward. "But here's the thing. I wasn't trying to outsmart you. I just listened to what the truth was already screaming." From the back of the courtroom, a woman stood. Gray suit, no-nonsense expression, a Department of Justice observer. "Your Honor," she said coolly, "I think we need to speak, in chambers. Immediately." Whitaker didn't respond. He looked cornered, like a man watching a tide he couldn't stop. Marcus glanced at his client, a young black woman falsely accused of fraud. Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness, but from the first real hope she'd felt in months. Then Marcus leaned in, his voice lower, meant only for the judge. "You silenced too many voices. But you made one mistake. You underestimated mine." The courtroom doors burst open. A second woman stepped in. "I have an affidavit," she said, holding it up. "Signed by 2 former clerks. They witnessed Whitaker altering court documents." The DOJ official took the affidavit. "We're placing this courtroom on recess pending federal review." Whitaker stood frozen, not defiant, but afraid. Marcus began gathering his files, but as he turned to leave, his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You've poked the wrong bear, Reed. There's more at stake than you know. Back off, or you won't make it to your next case." Marcus's fingers clenched around the phone. The camera panned slowly over his unreadable expression. The courtroom was still echoing with the murmurs from the last session, and Judge Whitaker sat in his high-backed chair, flipping through case notes like they were beneath him. For weeks, he tried everything to rattle attorney Marcus Cole, cutting him off mid-sentence, undermining his objections, even openly mocking his client's character. But nothing had worked, and now Marcus was back, with a new motion, a new witness, and the fire of justice burning in his chest. The bailiff called court into session. "All rise." Everyone stood as Judge Whitaker entered, robe swaying behind him, chin tilted arrogantly. But Marcus didn't flinch. The judge's voice boomed. "Let's make this quick, Mr. Cole. I assume you're here with yet another pointless appeal?" Marcus stepped forward calmly, placing a thick folder on the bench. "Your Honor, I have reason to believe key evidence in this case was intentionally suppressed. I'm requesting the court to review this new testimony before proceeding." Whitaker scoffed. "What evidence? Another emotional plea from someone with a sob story?" The courtroom held its breath. "No, Your Honor," Marcus replied coolly. "This is from Detective Ryan Keller, the original lead investigator who was pulled off the case under suspicious circumstances." That name hit like a lightning bolt. Whitaker blinked. "Detective Keller's report was deemed inadmissible." You know that. I have a signed affidavit from him stating he was pressured to alter his findings. And I have audio to prove it. Gasps rippled through the court. You're bluffing, Whitaker snapped. But Marcus didn't waver. Play Exhibit C14, please. A hush fell over the courtroom as a grainy audio recording filled the air. Keller's voice crackled through static. I was told by someone in the DA's office that if I didn't remove Marcus Cole's client from the suspect list, my job was on the line. They said Judge Whitaker wouldn't allow it. The room exploded. Whitaker's gavel slammed. Order! Order in this court! But the damage was done. The courtroom buzzed like a shaken beehive. Journalists furiously scribbled notes. Whitaker looked like a man caught in a net he helped weave. This is slander, he shouted. No, Your Honor, Marcus said, standing tall. This is the truth catching up. Then the doors opened. Detective Keller himself walked into the courtroom, flanked by two internal affairs officers. Whitaker's eyes widened in panic. What is the meaning of this? Keller's voice was steady. I've come to testify. For the first time, Judge Whitaker's mask cracked. Sweat glistened on his brow. The judge looked at the bailiff, then at the court clerk. This hearing is over. Court is adjourned. But Marcus wasn't done. Actually, Your Honor, he said, voice rising with righteous fury. You're no longer in control here. Suddenly, two federal agents stepped into view from the back row. Judge Whitaker, one of them said, you are under investigation for obstruction of justice, conspiracy to suppress evidence, and judicial misconduct. The entire courtroom froze. Whitaker's hands shook as he reached for his gavel, then hesitated. You can't. You don't know what you're doing. Oh, I do, Marcus said. And so does the world. The judge staggered back in his chair, eyes wild. But just as the agents approached, Whitaker reached beneath his bench. Wait, he's... Someone screamed. Then everything went black. A loud noise rang out. A woman shrieked. Panic erupted as chairs toppled and people scrambled for the exit. The sound echoed through the courtroom like thunder, a gunshot. For a split second, silence reigned. Then chaos exploded. People screamed, diving for cover. Papers flew, and the judge's gavel tumbled to the floor with a deafening crash. Marcus Cole dropped instantly behind the defense table, eyes wide, heart pounding in his chest. Detective Keller shouted, "Get down!" as the two federal agents pulled out their sidearms, scanning the room for the shooter. Judge Whitaker's chair was empty. He was gone. The courtroom doors burst open as court security rushed in, pushing people toward the exits. Marcus's mind raced. Was Whitaker trying to shoot someone? Had someone else fired the shot? Amid the chaos, Marcus spotted the judge stumbling near the exit, clutching his arm, blood seeping through his fingers. Whitaker's face was a mask of fear and rage. "You can't run from this!" Marcus shouted, standing up, his voice cutting through the noise. But the judge didn't answer. He pushed through the crowd and disappeared into the hallway. The security team sealed the courtroom. The judge's sudden outburst had turned the case upside down. Paramedics were called. Detective Keller was shaken but safe. Marcus scanned the courtroom, seeing terrified faces, reporters already whispering about a possible assassination attempt or a scandalous cover-up. Hours later, the courtroom was empty except for a few officers guarding the entrance. Marcus sat alone, replaying the day's events in his head. Whitaker's desperate act had only confirmed what Marcus had suspected all along. This case was bigger than anyone imagined. Outside, news crews swarmed the courthouse, broadcasting live updates. Breaking news! Judge Whitaker wounded in apparent shooting at federal corruption hearing. Marcus's phone buzzed. It was his client, the young man whose life depended on this case. "Are you okay? What happens now?" The voice trembled. Marcus took a deep breath. "We're just getting started." The aftermath, the news spread like wildfire. The judge's injury became front-page headlines nationwide. Public outcry for justice and transparency skyrocketed. Federal investigators intensified their probe into Whitaker's conduct and the DA's office. New evidence was uncovered, including emails revealing a conspiracy to derail the defense. Marcus became the face of the fight against judicial corruption, a symbol of resilience and hope. Yet, despite the victory, questions lingered. What had pushed Judge Whittaker to the edge? How deep did the corruption really run? And could Marcus protect his client in a system that seemed rigged against them both? The courtroom drama wasn't just about one case. It was a battle for the soul of justice itself. As the dust settled, Marcus reflected on the journey. He remembered the arrogant sneers, the silencing tactics, the endless obstacles thrown at him. But none of that mattered anymore. What mattered was the truth. The fight for his client. The chance to expose a broken system and demand change. Marcus looked out the courthouse window. The city bustled below, unaware of the quiet battles fought within its walls. But change was coming. And Marcus was ready. So, what do you think? Was Judge Whittaker's desperate act a moment of weakness or something more sinister? How often do you think corruption hides behind the robes of justice? Can one lawyer really make a difference in a system stacked against the vulnerable? What would you do if you were in Marcus's shoes, fighting for justice against all odds? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters. If you're passionate about stories that expose the truth and shine a light on injustice, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. We bring you real, gripping stories every week that you won't want to miss. Thank you for being part of this journey with us. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and keep fighting for justice.